In our presentation today, we'll be talking to you about ethics. This presentation will be split into 5 key parts. Firstly, we'll give to you a clear statement of our study. Secondly, we will inform you of the ethical issue related to our case study. After that, we will talk to you about the Royal Academy's statement of principle and link it back to our study. Then we'll move on to the IChemE Code of Conduct, and finally we shall conclude with our very own 5-point Code of Conduct. So without further ado, we will begin.
So, before we delve into our case study, we'll give you some background information on ethics. According to University College San Diego, ethical decision-making refers to the process of evaluating and choosing among alternatives in a manner consistent with ethical principles. In making ethical decisions, it is necessary to perceive and eliminate unethical options and select the best ethical alternative. Now we're going to move on to the summary of the case study. So, Gilbane gold is sludge from the Gilbane River, which is widely used as a fertilizer by farmers. It's commonly used for increasing crop efficiency, which strengthens the economy by reducing tax by £300 per annum. Z Corp is a high-tech firm that has moved into Gilbane to manufacture its goods. Like all other firms in the area, the company has to follow stringent regulations about toxic discharge from its manufacturing plants and has to accurately test its waste disposal for the toxic contaminants. David Jackson, an environmental engineer, is a new employee of Z Corp who attests the accuracy of the tests that give results if the company has exceeded its limits. There is a new test and an old test. The new test is more expensive, so it shows that Z Corp has exceeded limits, which means the company could face legal action. David has some options on what to do.
There are 2 types of ethical issues in this case: primary ethical issue and secondary ethical issues. Primary refers to whistleblowing. This is when a person working within an organization reports the organization's misconduct. This person can either be a current or past employee. Also, note that the misconduct can be a past act, can be ongoing, or can be in the planning stages. There are 2 types of whistleblowing. The first is internal whistleblowing. This means that the whistleblower reports misconduct to another person within the organization. The second type is external. This means that the whistleblower reports misconduct to a person outside the organization, such as law enforcement or the media. David, as an employee of Z Corp, could go either stay quiet and let the people in higher position decide the outcomes, or go against the people of higher authority. But the potential consequences of this is his career opportunity being restricted and face suspension or a firing.
So moving on to the secondary ethical issue, this refers to the obligation of engineers with respect to environmental issues, management problems having to do with honesty and trust between businesses and its host communities, the issue of the fairness of a community towards a local manufacturing plant, the problem raised for individuals and groups by the necessity for actions in the face of inconclusive scientific evidence, and the relationship of law and morality.
So what is our case study about? David is at a tie with whether to expose the results of the test or to stay silent and loyal to his company. The public are being deceived as they are not being informed of the new test and the potential risks it carries with its high accuracy. If David was to reveal the information, it could not only affect his job security, but also have a drastic effect on the financial stability of the company, as they would have to face harsh prosecutions. As an environmental engineer, his responsibility is to consider the welfare of the environment and the well-being of the people of Gilbane. This puts him in a dilemma on whether to be a good engineer or a good employee.
Now we are going to discuss the ethical issues regarding this. One concern regarding the violation is that there have been 2 different tests used. The newer test shows that Z Corp had been violating regulation, some courts taking the data from the old test and not the new one. The new test is the one that shows that Z Corp has been violating regulation. This means that the matter of Z Corp violating the law is inconclusive. Also, Z Corp is not required to use the new test, and therefore Z Corp is not required by law to reveal the results and these tests to the city. However, the people of Gilbane could be affected, and somehow in the future the violations may be revealed, and this could mean that the company could face a bigger penalty.
The violation of the regulation is a concern because there could be health effects associated with the discharge in the long term for people living in Gilbane. Having excessive discharge means the sludge from Gilbane that is sold could be contaminated to a toxic level. This could be damaging to the health of those who use the sludge to grow crops, which also turn out toxic after they consume them. One of the main incomes of Gilbane is from selling the sludge. If people are found to become ill, then the income coming into Gilbane could stop. The toxicity of the discharge could affect lives immensely.
Another reason why this is a concern is because the toxic metals from the discharge could affect the environment. It would cause pollution and wildlife and ecosystems, not only in the Gilbane, but the surrounding areas could be affected and biodiversity could decrease.
However, the test has only been used for a short time and the magnitude of the violations are small. This is an issue because it raises the question of whether or not Z Corp faces prosecution. Because of the newer test has only been used for a short time, it is difficult to assess for how long Z Corp has been violating regulations. If it has only been for a short while, the risks associated with the discharge may not be significant. Because the magnitude of the violations have only been small, using the new test, it is difficult to say how much of the discharge has the poison in it and has affected the sludge. It may not cause any health issues.
If the solution to the problem is to reveal the test to the city, this may or may not have a negative impact. The city may understand the company's situation, or they could go against it.
Okay, David has been deliberately concealing information, even though he is the one who signs the report to say that the company is following regulations. Concealing the information from the new tests is a breach of faith and perhaps even a violation.
Even a violation of the law, it is expected for him to be concerned with the health, safety, and welfare of the public. However, David is a new employee of Z Corp, and there are certain expectations that come with the role, as well as considering the effect there would be on the company. If he was to reveal the test, he could not only lose his job. Revealing test results could mean that he will lose it as this issue affects the company. However, even the company's financial stability may be affected. It doesn't mean that they should be allowed to continue their operation with deceptive practices.
The City of Gilbane is unfair in requiring Z Corp and other businesses to bear the full financial burden of complying with the stringent standards imposed on industrial discharges into the sewer system.
Another issue is that Z Corp is not fair to David in forcing him to take the possible legal liability associated with failing to disclose the results of the new test to the city, when part of his role is to serve the company as well. Him revealing the test results could mean that the company faces penalty, but this is since David concealed the information to begin with. Now we are at the third subcategory of the presentation, where we'll incorporate reference from the Royal Academy Society. The first point is accuracy and rigour. With regards to our case study, once the new tests were developed, it proved to be more accurate. However, it was very expensive as a result of it. Despite this, the company Z Corp is not legally obliged to defer to this new test, and this company is not displaying accuracy and rigour as they are completely disregarding the new test potential rather than focusing solely on the costing, as the old test is cheaper and a more convenient test for their liking. The necessary means for being accurate are available to the company at their disposal but are not being utilised and considered due to the costings.
The second point is honesty and integrity. The withholding of non-disclosure of vital results regarding the current test is considered dishonest, as the quantity of waste being discharged into sewers is significantly above the recommended guideline. This is very concerning because the effluent is not measured independently, rather it is measured using a ratio of toxic volume to the overall volume discharged. This could result in the damage of crops as a result of the large quantities of the sludge. In addition, some say that animals that feed on crops grown in using Gilbane Gold can lose the ability to reproduce and even worse, die due to poisoning.
The third point is respect for life, law, and the public good. This issue is a risk to the environment and the species which inhabit the environment because if large quantities of fertilizers are used, this results in a greater overall quantity of heavy metals which in rivers and lakes, and also many aquatic species can be at risk regarding the process. This process is called eutrophication. Essentially, this is when fertilizers are washed into rivers, forming an algae layer on the surface of the river. The algae blocks the sunlight entering the river, meaning that aquatic plants cannot photosynthesize. This means that there are not enough oxygen concentration, which affects aquatic animals' ability to respire, eventually resulting in their death and affecting the food chain. In terms of the legal argument, this practice is technically legal as Z Corp is complying with the Council's rules and regulation. Nevertheless, this is having a massive effect to us, the environment and wildlife. Buyers of Gilbane Gold place high level of trust in the sellers, and they should understand that they have a responsibility to put the customer's well-being above everything else. However, by selling their Gilbane Gold, knowing the potential dangers, completely goes against the concept of respect and trust.
Finally, the last point of the is responsible leadership. This can be exercised in this case by the Gilbane town changing their test to the new, more accurate one, which will benefit everyone. This will also result in people being more inspired to display moral actions and have a good understanding of right and wrong in similar situations. Responsible leadership cannot be shown by the company having their very own targets and recommended waste, rather than following the bare minimum in the council's and legal recommendation. In addition, data gathered regarding the new test can be shared to managers and workers discreetly, rather than general public. This will ensure that there isn't a public outbreak, and perhaps the issue can be resolved in a structured and efficient manner, as opposed to just turning a blind eye to the issue.
Having researched the IChemE Code of Conduct, we have picked a handful of rules that link to our case study. The first is prevent avoidable danger to health or safety. In our case study, this rule was not even taken into consideration, not in the slightest, as Z Corp disregarded the dangers of people who would be exposed.
Number 2, prevent avoidable adverse impact on the environment. Relating back to our case study, the old test has an adverse effect on the environment in many ways, causing aquatic animals and plants to die as a result of eutrophication. The pollution of the river has resulted in the food chain being impacted.
Maintain their competence. A good way about accomplishing is for them to disclose information that the previous test was unable to identify and share this information with business and managers as opposed to the rest of the community and figure out a way to deal with this issue.
Reject bribery and other corrupt practices. In this scenario, it is corruption by employees if they knew of the situation full well but decided not to take action to protect the business's interest.
Number 5, notifying about criminal offences. According to our case study, the current discharge is not illegal, so this point is not applicable, but this factor is very important nonetheless.
Avoiding conflict of interest. The main conflict of interest here is Gilbane's profit and potential to strengthen the economy against this temptation is morality. Whether to completely forget about the new test and its accuracy that comes with its fair share cost of whether to continue using the old test for the sake of business reason rather than ethical reasons.
To conclude with our presentation, we have come up with our 5-point code of conduct. First one being supply honest and accurate results at all times to ensure that the test does not detriment society or go over the recommended limit. So they should use the new tests as they by far more accurate and give us a clearer picture of what we are at the moment. Despite the new test being more expensive, the price tag is fully justified as it is high resolution. This means that any potential threat in the future can be eliminated, such as potential of this new test, as it will provide us with more information.
Number 2, notifying managers and owners of the situation and displaying concern. David should attempt to discuss this situation with the managers about the issue, and he must keep a copy of all the emails and discussion that took place. He should try and attempt and express his concern to the people of authority rather than immediately blow the whistle because the consequences are severe.
Think about the long-term future. This was completely disregarded by Z Corp as their sites were focusing on the short-term success of maximizing profit. However, little did they know the long-term impact has the potential to be catastrophic.
Never feel the urge to remain a passenger to ensure job security. Stand up for what is right. David should raise this issue to the managers rather than remain silent, because he could get caught up in the issue if an investigation was to occur. Then his career prospects would really take a big hit.
Ensure procedures and regulations are being met in the future. David should try hard to ensure the company are following the rules and regulations are being met, and that there are no mispresentations or distortions of key results which can have an adverse effect on the environment. Thank you for listening to our presentation.